Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to go over my build for the Wintertide occultist. I'll show you how the build works, the mechanics, and everything else you need to know to make a successful Wintertide build. This build's been a long time in the making. I just didn't want to release it until it was ready, and I had problems with it dying a lot, so it's taken me a while to adjust the build to prevent that from happening quite so frequently. This build utilises Wintertide brand. This applies a brand to the enemy, which slowly does damage each tick. Now it starts off with low damage, and as it's been on the target for longer, that damage increases by 20% per interval. In this case, our interval is Our interval is 0.15 seconds. So every 0.15 seconds, Wintertide brand increases in damage by 20%, up to a total of 400%. This is 4 times the damage at the start and the end. Now this is quite noticeable, especially against enemies that are much higher than you, because it gives them a lot more chance than normal to actually attack you because the damage isn't that high yet. Now what we do to try and mitigate this is also drop Orb of Storms. This causes elemental equilibrium to prop. It also applies curses, which cause the enemy to explode due to Profane Bloom. Now there are 2 ways of playing this build. One is to stand far away and hit them, which is pretty safe. The other is to be a little more aggressive. And for this we find a large pack. We jump into the middle of them, hit brand recall, which then gets Wintertide brand on them and kills them very, very quickly. Now the bonus of using the brand recall method is that it takes the brands at their current level. So if they've been going for 10 stacks, those 10 stacks will be transferred over to the new enemies, and you won't have to start at the low edge again. Let's talk about cluster jewels. The cluster jewels on the left hand side of the screen are absolutely required for the build to function correctly. Those on the right hand side of the screen I would highly recommend, although you can quite happily switch these out if you find something better. By default, it would appear that Wintertide only damages the target to which it is attached. We use Holy Conquest to cause the brand to detach every 0.3 seconds. While it's on the ground, it attacks all targets around it before it reattaches to another target. What this means is that Wintertide brand really doesn't clear very well without the use of Holy Conquest, and therefore it's absolutely essential we use it on the build. Moving on now to Energy from Naught. This basically gives us 100 flat energy shield, which is then scaled by our energy shield increases from the tree. I use 2 of these on my build, and this is because we use Chevron's wrapping. Whilst it prevents all chaos damage from penetrating the energy shield, it doesn't give us a full amount of flat energy shield, so we get these from the cluster jewels. My final cluster jewel notable is Vile Reinvigoration. We utilise this purely for the regenerate 2% of energy shield per second if you've killed an enemy recently. This supplements the passive regen of the shield, which occurs whilst we're still under attack, making the build feel so much more survivable. Moving on now to the Ascendancy choices of the build. Our Ascendancy is occultist. First we choose Void Beacon. This reduces the cold resistance of all nearby enemies by 20%. It also reduces life regeneration rate of all those enemies, making them die quicker. Following on from this, we choose Frigid Wake. This gives us 20% to cold damage over time multiplier, so that's 20% more damage with cold damage over time. It also prevents us from being chilled and frozen. It also offers some defensive benefits in the form of freezing chilled unique enemies every 0.6 seconds and freezing chilled non-unique enemies for 0.6 seconds. This occurs every 4 seconds. Also, nearby chilled enemies deal 10% reduced damage with hits against you. From Merciless Lab, we choose Val Bastion. This grants us major defenses in the form of regenerating energy shield at 40 per second, and also regenerate 1% of energy shield per second for each enemy you or your minions have killed recently, which stacks up to 10%. Also, it grants us stun immunity whilst we have any energy shield. And then finally from Uberlab, we take Profane Bloom. This makes our curses apply to all enemies, including those that are hexproof, and gives us a 1 in 4 chance for them to explode, dealing a quarter of their maximum life as chaos damage. A link to the paste bin for Path of Building can be found in the description below the video. I just want to go over the keystones of the build, of which there are 5. The first is Runebinder. This reduces the number of tokens we can have by 1, and increases the number of brands we can have attached to an enemy, taking Wintertide brand up to 3. Next is Zealot's Oath, which basically converts all of our life regeneration to apply to energy shield instead. Next is Elemental Overload, which gives us 40% more damage if we've crit in the last 8 seconds. This isn't a crit build, so this helps boost our damage quite significantly. We then go with Elemental Equilibrium. When we hit the enemy with elemental damage, they will increase their resistance by plus 25 to the damage they've just been hit by, but it will reduce their resistance by 50% for any damage they haven't been hit by. As Wintertide brand doesn't hit, this means that whenever we use something that does hit of a different type, such as lightning, they will take 50% more damage from Wintertide brand. Our skill of choice for applying lightning is Orb of Storms. We also use this to apply our curses. And our final pick is Pain Attunement, which gives us 30% more spell damage when we're on low life, which is all the time, as we reserve life by utilising our orbs. And now on to the gear selection for this build. In the weapon slot, we're going to go for Spine of the First Claimant. This increases our damage over time multiplier, along with cold damage and cast speed. This is also dirt cheap and drops frequently, hence why I'm using it. If you have currency to burn, I'd suggest going for a rare wand with +1 to all cold spell gems, and then following the priorities of the scepter that we currently use. The shield slot sports the Prism Guardian Archon Kite Shield. Try saying that 10 times quickly. This is an absolute requirement of the build, as it allows us to charge any auras directly against our health instead of mana. Also, as we're not using blood magic, we don't get the massive increase to reservation, and the shield also gives us a 25% reduced mana reservation. What's also very nice is the 25% all res and the dexterity, which this build is seriously short of. Our chest slot requires 4 blues and 2 greens, and as we are low life, we do not want chaos damage to bypass our energy shield, and therefore Chevron's Wrapping is a requirement for this build. If you can't afford this straight away, then go for a 5-link version, which at time of recording costs less than 1 Exalt. The reason I chose not to include Solaris Lorica as a cheaper alternative to this chest is that it's strength based and it will be very difficult to get 6 off colours. Also, don't go straight in for the 4 blue 2 green when you're purchasing this from another player. These colours seem to be very expensive, and they're very easy to get by spamming it with a chromatic orb. This was the most expensive part of the build and came in at 2 Exalt. Our helmet selection is the Rhyme Gaze, and I chose it because of the increased damage over time multiplier and the increased energy shield. I currently have this configured 3 blues and a green. For our belt, we're using Baited Breath. This is a unique belt which gives us massive energy shield, intelligence, but also increased energy shield recharge rate. I wasn't able to find a belt on the market that gave me anywhere close for the energy shield that was a reasonable price. Our last unique item on the build is the presence of Triula, Onyx Amulet. This converts 20% of our maximum life converted to energy shield. We have about 1,000 life, so this gives us about 200 flat energy shield to play with, which is equivalent to 2 energy from Naught passive jewels. I chose Holy Dominion as my anointment because I was short on elemental resistances, and also this gives us some nice elemental damage. If you do want to go for all out damage, then Snowforged is a powerful alternative. The build sports 2 rare rings, both of them Crusader influenced, which give us the increased maximum energy shield, which you can't get otherwise. However, as the build is very short, both strength and dexterity, get these first before you go for increased maximum energy shield. After this, we go for resistances, and then nice to have if we can afford it is plus X to maximum energy shield, increased cast speed, and increased cold damage. In the glove slot, we want Hunter influenced. This allows us to get percentage to cold damage over time multiplier, drastically increasing our damage output. Use any other open prefixes and suffixes for increased energy shield, plus X to maximum energy shield, and resistances. And if you've still got some spare and can afford it, let's go for attributes of strength and dexterity again. The best boots in slot are rare sorcerer boots. You want to prioritize getting increased movement speed, resistances, and again attributes, which again is strength and dexterity. Nice to have, increased energy shield, to maximum energy shield, and chance to avoid being shocked, but that requires a Crusader base, which you may or may not want to spend the money on. I just thought as we're already immune to cold and chill, the ability not to get shocked will reduce incoming damage to us by up to 50%, which is scaled by shock. No build will be complete without talking about the flasks. We utilise 2 unique flasks and 3 magic flasks. For our unique flasks, first and foremost is Wise Oak. This causes damage of an element which is the same type as our resistance, which is the highest possible overcap value, to penetrate 15% of enemy resistances. It also grants us 10% reduced damage taken from element which is the lowest uncapped. For optimal use, we will balance all flasks to exactly the same overcapped resistance rate, say 115 each. As I'm far too lazy to do that, and it's far too costly to do that, I just have cold as the highest resistance to give me the damage bonus, and then my damage reduction goes to lightning. I'm only 1% off getting both lightning and fire to take reduced damage, but it's very, very difficult to get that 1% difference. If you are more patient than me, then I would seriously recommend doing it. The next unique flask is a Witchfire's Brew. This gives us a 33% increased damage over time during the flask effect, but also causes a level 21 Despair Curse to affect everyone around us. Now our Orb of Storms does apply 2 curses, and we only are allowed a maximum of 2 curses. So when this flask activates, any mob around us will have one of the existing curses overridden. The only reason I've kept the 2 curses on the Orb of Storms is for when the flask is down during boss fights. This does mean that potentially you can switch one of the Orb of Storm curses to something else. Onto the magic flasks, and the first is the Surgeon's Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline. This grants us a total of 66% increased movement speed during flask effect, but also 20% chance to gain a flask charge when you deal a critical strike. This allows us to run much faster and get in and out of trouble relatively quickly. We then go for the Experimenter's Basalt Flask of Quickening, which grants us physical damage reduction, but also increased cast speed during flask effect and 34% increased duration. This causes Wintertide brand to build up stacks quicker when the flask is active, as the brand activation frequency is also affected by our cast speed. Last but not least is the Ample Silver Flask of Staunching. This gives us immunity to bleeding and 17 to maximum charges. In addition, it also grants the buff Onslaught, which increases our attack, cast and movement speed by 20%. This stacks on top of the Quicksilver to give us even more movement speed, but also the cast speed again increases Wintertide's frequency and therefore helps it build stacks quicker. For many years I underestimated the power of Flasks and didn't really bother about them till late in the game, once I got all the gear sorted. Some of our Flasks are very cheap and make such a massive difference to our build that I can't emphasize enough the importance of getting these Flasks as early as possible. In some cases, the effect you get from them is far better than a piece of gear. Now for our gem links for the build, let's start off with the chest and the Wintertide brand, which takes centre stage in this build. Wintertide brand creates a magical brand which can attach to a nearby enemy, dealing cold damage over time and chilling them. It periodically activates while attached, gaining stages that raise the damage. When removed, a short duration debuff dealing the same damage over time and chill is applied to each nearby enemy. At 20 stacks, which is the maximum without any kind of lab enchant, Wintertide brand deals 400% increased damage. The first link is Elemental Focus. This gives a total of 49% more damage at maximum level. It also grants 10% increased elemental damage at quality 20. The support gem also brings its own drawback, in the form of not being able to freeze or chill with the skill. Fortunately, our Ascendancy has us covered, because it both chills and freezes nearby enemies periodically. Efficiency support is up next, which gives us 20% more spell damage, 24% more damage over time, and makes Wintertide brand last 16% longer, which is more time at maximum stacks. It also grants 10% increased damage over time as we reach gem level 20. Moving on to Hypothermia support, and this support gem offers a lot, only one of which we can use, which gives us 39% more cold damage over time at gem level 20. Swift Affliction gives us 44% more damage over time at gem level 20 at the cost of 15% reduced duration of Wintertide brand. Last but not least is Controlled Destruction, giving us 44% more spell damage at the cost of 100% reduced critical strike chance. Wintertide brand not being able to hit, therefore cannot crit, so this is no drawback to us, as all our critical strikes are made by Orb of Storms. If due to cost constraints you decide to go with a 5-link temporarily, then I would drop Hypothermia. Whoa, wait a minute. While recording the voiceover for the track, it occurred to me that Elemental Focus could be taken off and replaced with Bone Chill. This makes Hypothermia far more effective. Bone Chill is also effective without Elemental Focus. This reduces the overall damage of the build by 50,000 per brand, whilst at maximum stacks. In exchange, we get absolutely ridiculous chill effect from both Hypothermia and Bone Chill, meaning enemies now crawl. This results in far superior survivability on the build. I was now able to kill most tier 16 bosses without them being able to even hit me. This transforms the gameplay from a sphincter clenching experience to an absolute delight, especially for a player like me who hates to die. In all seriousness, both gem configurations are perfectly playable, but I do far prefer the survivability of using Bone Chill over Elemental Focus. In the case that you don't go for the Elemental Focus version, I would suggest not using Bone Chill in the event that you're using a 5-link. This will still give us the full chill effect of Hypothermia. Our second most important skill setup is Orb of Storms. The links for this are Orb of Storms, Curse on Hit, Enfeeble, and Frostbite. You may also switch out Enfeeble for Temporal Chains if you prefer this. If you do choose to drop one of the curses, as we discussed in the Flask section, then I would replace it with Increased Critical Support, as this skill causes Elemental Overload to proc. This skill also does so much more, in the form of causing Elemental Equilibrium to proc, and applying curses, which causes Profane Bloom to make things go bang. In our gloves, we have Cast when Damage Taken, linked to a Mortal Call, Clarity, which helps us maintain our mana, and Zealotry, which grants us critical strike chance and extra spell damage. Depending on how much mana you get on your gear, you may want to increase or lower the level of Clarity slightly to compensate. The build also utilises Val Cold Snap, linked to increased AoE, Arcane Surge, and Hypothermia. We use the normal version of Cold Snap to generate frenzy charges, which are generated as mobs die within the area of effect. During perilous encounters, or to provide extra damage during boss fights, we hit Val Cold Snap, which creates an area of effect around us, dealing massive damage. Our weapon houses our movement skill Flame Dash, along with Brand Recall. Both of these are linked to Second Wind, which grants Flame Dash an extra charge and reduced cooldown, and grants Brand Recall a small cooldown reduction. Finally, we get to our key aura gems, which are socketed in the shield, which grants them +2 to level. These are Val Discipline, which grants us increased energy shield, and then in emergency starts energy shield recharge. Or at least it does if you're not asleep when you actually need to press it, most of the time.
I was asleep. We then have Malevolence and Hatred, both of which have the sole purpose of massively increasing our damage. And now for some random useful or helpful stuff that I picked up throughout the build. For Pantheons, go Soul of Lanaris and Soul of Garakan. Please remember to fully upgrade these. Of course, the minor one can be switched out depending on what the situation calls for. Next, the Bandits. Destroy them. All of them. Is it hardcore viable? No. Can I use it in solo self-found? Probably not. Too many uniques. The total cost of the build for me was about 6.5 Exalted Orbs. Some of this will be down to the Harvest League making things much cheaper than they would be normally. And please remember that the cost of builds can go up and down based on the whims of the player-driven economy. Did I enjoy the build? Until I managed to solve the problems around it dying, it was beginning to really irritate me. However, I did mention in a comment that I would be making a guide for this if I could make it work. And then I became kind of obsessed with making it 1 work and 2 feel really good. Now as a result, I'm really enjoying how the build feels. I also got a massive sense of satisfaction for sticking with it. What maps can't we run? Well, as we don't hit, we can actually run full elemental reflect maps, which is nice. The only thing we couldn't run is life, energy shield and mana does not regen. Reduce life, energy shield and mana was also annoying. I also hate temporal chains, but this was perfectly doable. Would I league start with this build? It's potentially doable, now I know how to solve the pitfalls, but full damage would not be realised until we got Siobhan's wrapping. I would also probably kill a Lyra for the extra mana regen. Although, come on, let's face it, league start has got to be a shadow. The utility and survivability is just amazing off the Trickster Ascendancy. Now for levelling, I level the skill using Creeping Frost for mob killing and Wintertide for boss killing. Wintertide just cannot do clear until we have the Holy Conquest cluster duel. I did equip this at Act 8 and then it felt good. I levelled with the usual levelling gear such as Tabula Rasa, Loctonian Caress, Gold Rim, those winter something boots. I did record my level progression through the acts, in case you need help with the levelling process. I will leave a link to the playlist at the end of the video. In closing, I'd just like to say I hope you all enjoy this build. I'd also like to thank everybody for the support they've given me so far. I've been doing this now for 6 weeks. And I hope you like the content and I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please let me know in the comments. Please subscribe and please hit that little bell thing that tells you when I next release a video. Likewise, if the build fell short of your expectations, please do let me know how I can improve in the future and what I missed. If you do make any improvements to the build, please do share with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. I've been Altec2k. Thanks for watching. You've been watching Altec2k. Thank you for watching.